Welcome to This Week in Money. I'm Jim Goddard. Today, Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com tells us the major equity markets again reached record highs. He also chips in on how the trouble in the Middle East affected oil. Martin Armstrong, founder of Armstrong Economics, gives us an extensive interview. He says major universities have admitted what they teach the economic leaders of the future is wrong. He also weighs in on what drives separatist movements like the one on Alberta and what the solution to those separatist feelings might be. Also at the end of the show, we'll have company showcase updates from American Manganese President Larry Reaugh and Cypress Development's Don Mosher. We'll talk to Ross Clark right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMY.V, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Reaugh, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to This Week in Money, the source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com, where you'll find insightful market commentary and timely technical analysis. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
It's been an exciting week.
Ross, with all the trouble in the Middle East over the past week, how did oil react?
Well, Monday night was pretty exciting, and Tuesday was the pivotal day. Here you had oil had been sitting around reasonably steady going into Monday. We were sitting just under $60, and as the Iranians sent the missiles in, we ended up with a big spike up through to 65 and change on oil, but it couldn't do much more than spend about 10 or 12 hours up there. We had, right at that point, this just, it's funny the way the technicals will sometimes just match the fundamentals. And in this case, the rally from 52, we had a moving average band that originally was a target at $62. And over time, that band had been moving up as prices were just grinding their way higher. By the time we got to about a week ago, the band was at 64, and on Monday it was at 65.5. We peaked just over 66 with a relative strength index that was nicely up to 80, which is the extreme you expect to see at this point in the move. And guess what? This was a sell the news event, because on Tuesday, when everything seemed to calm back down again, you've got oil now back down at $59, where we were the better part of 3 or 4 weeks ago. So we've been of the mindset that the situation in the oil market is got a bias to the upside as we push through this year, maybe into the second quarter of next year, but a lot of volatility along the way. And this correction is just very, very timely with the break we've had. We've given back now, in a span of, 4 days, we've given back half of the gain from the October low. Probably going to see a little stability, but anything down towards the $56 range, if we get some nice oversold readings, that's going to be another time to load up the long positions again. So shouldn't take too long. Maybe a week or two. There might be the next really good opportunity in the oil market. So stay tuned.
Did the equity markets on both sides of the border again enjoy a record high week?
Oh, yeah. Here it was Monday night. These markets got killed. I think the Dow futures were down something like 400 or 500 points. Came back, gangbusters, ended up new high closes into Thursday, gave back a little bit on Friday, but still the highest weekly closes that we've seen in, the NASDAQ, the S&P, the Dow. The only one that didn't manage to do it was the Russell. The Russell peaked out 2 weeks ago and looking a little bit tired. Interesting, some of the big names on the banking side, like at JP Morgan, has not been doing well. It's underperformed relative to the S&P for about 2 weeks now, and it's starting to look like it's ready for a bit of correction. And our seasonal work suggested that by the time you got to January the 8th, that being on Thursday, on Wednesday, the close of that day then becomes a real catalyst point in terms of measuring the forward momentum from that point in terms of what the market can do. So as we move into next week, I want to see this market hold up pretty well. I don't think if it gives back a little bit, it will probably give back a lot. So it's time for pretty tight stops for the traders, and we'll once again, this is one that I think you want to just stay on top of pretty closely.
Were the so-called FANGs the leaders on the big boards?
Getting a little bit of diversification there. Apple's here we are. Apple's $310. A year ago, this stock was $145. So that's a new all-time high. You've got Facebook making new highs, Google making new highs, but the rest of the FANGs are pretty tired in here. Amazon's not doing too much. Netflix is easing back. So these have been the real key drivers. I think they were something like 40% of market capitalization in the NDX. So as they move around, those top names, they have a huge effect as far as the indices are concerned. Starting to see some extremes up there in terms of our readings. So if they start to roll over, and this is the thing about trends, trend stays in motion far longer than you might ever anticipate, but the longer they go without a correction, the more severe the ensuing move comes. So once again, we tend to be cautious at times when things are running and be brave when there's blood in the streets. So this is one of those caution times.
Ross, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Well, we might want to remind people that the charts that I'm doing now, we're putting up on Twitter as I see various things of interest. The Twitter handle is Charts by Ross.
My guest has been Ross Clark from chartsandmarkets.com. Coming up, Martin Armstrong, next on This Week in Money.
Always consult your investment professional before making any investment decision.
AMY.V Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia and the Yukon, trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the OTCQB, symbol ABNAF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, AMY.V's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at AMYresources.com.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Welcome back. I'm speaking with Martin Armstrong, founder of Armstrong Economics, available online at armstrongeconomics.com. He's speaking to us from Cancun, Mexico. Martin, welcome back to This Week in Money.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Martin, you have a new book out, the title, Manipulating the World Economy, the Rise of Modern Monetary Theory and the Inevitable Fall of Classic Economics. Is there an alternative? Now, this is a massive book. It weighs 3 pounds. Well, I think the title kind of tells us what you're telling us about, but what should people take from this book?
Well, basically, I was kind of like lobbied by a lot of people to put out something that is more authoritative against this MMT stuff. So that's basically what it is. And what I've done is really gone through. I have reproduced newspaper articles so you can see what I've read over the years to reach my conclusions rather than just opinions. It's effectively showing that what has been going on ever since really Karl Marx. He unleashed this idea that government has the power and the right to manipulate society. Of course, he was going all the way with communism, but really every economist ever since then, Keynes, for example, it's always been about manipulating society, raising interest rates, lowering interest rates, all these things to basically influence demand. Now, the problem is they've used this theory and have, it just doesn't work. I mean, obviously what's happened now is you have negative interest rates, and it still hasn't stimulated the economy. So then you start getting into these, well, it didn't work because they were hoarding their money. So the solution is really, we should eliminate money and just make it all electronic. Then they can't take it out of banks. I mean, they just keep coming up with more and more draconian ideas to support a theory that obviously doesn't work. And it hasn't worked. Paul Volcker, who, recently died, who was the head of the Federal Reserve going into 1981, where he raised interest rates to 14%. He came out with a book in 1979, which is entitled Rediscovery of the Business Cycle. And in there, he plainly states, he says, look, this new economic theory of Keynes, it failed. And although, he basically said it doesn't work, and rediscovering the business cycle was that the free markets basically go against us. Nonetheless, he still tried his best to try and go against the free markets and failed, really. That's when I, had first met with the people at the U.S. Treasury. I mean, I thought, this is crazy. I went down there and I was young back then, and I assumed something, maybe they didn't understand what was happening. I said, you've raised interest rates, the discount rate at 14%. I said, the government has got to pay, unbelievable levels of interest. I said, just a simple pocket calculator, the national debt is going to more than, double by, within, the first decade. And they simply said to me, yes, no, that's true, but we'll be paying back with cheaper dollars. And so I walked out of there like, okay, you guys really think you know what you're doing then, right? I mean, so it's been nothing but this theory of basically Keynesian economics, mixed with Marxism, which has brought us to this brink of absolute disaster. I mean, classical economics, as it's being presented, just doesn't work. These theories don't work. I mean, I won't mention, the universities, but actually 3 of the very top universities asked me if I would teach. And I went to lunch with one, and I said, why are you asking me to teach? And they literally said to me, we know what we're teaching doesn't work. I said, I really appreciate it, but I said, I'm uninterested in teaching a class. Okay? I said, I'd be glad to show up to do a guest lecture or something. And they admitted, they said, look, anybody that has real experience, nobody wants to come back and teach. I said, well, what do you expect? Who wants to stand there with a classroom of 30 kids that are throwing spitballs at them or something, It's just not, something that I think anybody that's actually been in the trenches has an aspiration to go do. So, but this is the problem we have. It's this nonsense of theories that have been going on, and unfortunately, I mean, when I was in school, I kind of saw the clash. I mean, I went to physics class, and they said nothing's random, and then you went to economics class, they said, oh, everything's random, so we can manipulate whatever we want. And I said, well, one of you guys is lying, One class says nothing's random, then I walk into the other class, everything's random. And that's been the problem. In physics, you actually have to prove a theory to win a Nobel Prize. In economics, all you got to do is say, oh, yes, the world will be very nice if we all just did this. Oh, okay, fine, we'll give you the Nobel Prize. That sounds nice. That's it. It's like being a poet or something. there's just, you don't have to prove anything. They come up with these wonderful theories, and I mean, we're hearing it, like from the source of communism was France, and this guy, Piketty he's getting, the problem with society is the disparity in income. It's back to Marxism and communism again. And, it's, why does one, football player or basketball player gets a lot more money than others? Because he draws in the crowd. So under Piketty's theory, everybody should be earning the same, which is basically Marxism. So, it's just really ridiculous. I mean, it's got nothing to do with disparity in income or whatever. Some people want to work real hard, some people don't. Other people want to work not just for money, but basically for accomplishment. I mean, everybody's different. So, but these, theories they try to do is just always reduce everything down to a single cause and effect, and that just does not work.
Of course, now in physics we have quantum theory, and everything is random, and who knows where a particular particle is at any particular time. So that theory has been changing. Economics just hasn't kept pace.
Yeah, I mean, well, even on in physics and the grand unified theory, nobody's come up with it yet. I mean, obviously there has to be something that basically links the two, but they haven't been able to discover it yet. I mean, they have just discovered dark matter, but I mean, we're still exploring in that area. But in economics, there is no definitive thing. You don't have to prove anything. It just has to sound nice. That's it.
By the way, how is your book doing, and where can people get it?
Well, we're going to have to come out with a third edition. I mean, the second edition went on sale at Amazon, and at first we thought it was a glitch. It was up for like a few hours, and we called to say, because all of a sudden it said unavailable, and I thought it was really just a computer error or something, but they sold out the entire printing within less than 3 hours. Apparently it was the fastest selling book on Amazon ever. And, they said, look, we think it's going to sell out, but, didn't think it was going to be in 3 hours. So we're coming out with a third edition. It's an expensive book to produce because it's completely printed in color. It's 8.5 by 11 size. It's more for like reference and whatever, and everything has to be documented in order to stand up. I mean, it can't be just, my opinion or anybody's opinion. It's got to, okay, here it is, period. So that's really what it is. We hope to have that up, back to Amazon by next month. But I mean, this is like the third, this will be the third edition. And I guess we're just going to have to double the size of the printing again. So it's been interesting, but apparently an awful lot of people were buying it, handing it out to other people. It's, and then a lot of people overseas couldn't even get a hold of it because it sold out too fast. We heard from a lot of Canadians the same problem. So, we're trying our best to make sure we increase it again. Hopefully it won't sell out in 3 hours again.
Do you hope that university professors might use your book and get some reality into the economy?
That's, we have had a lot of feedback on that and asking if it would be, could be taught in universities or something. I said, I'm fine with that, whatever they want to do, as long as I'm not the one standing up in class teaching it, that's fine.
Martin, what are your war cycles showing?
Basically, the general war cycle, which is, there are actually two cycles. There's one which is what you would call war between countries. But then you have one which is civil unrest. which is that one leads to separatist movements, revolutions, things of that nature. They tend to be internal. So this particular convergence began in 2014, and it has been going up with both of them. So up to, right now we're seeing it in rising in separatist movements. Government is collapsing. You can see it in so many areas. The hostility between left and right is just rising dramatically. And it's pretty disgusting, but this is the way empires and nations and city-states fall. Civilization is about people coming together. You have a set of rules, which become laws, to basically so that everybody, gets along. And when you start getting into a situation where it's one side tries to impose their demands upon the other side, the very purpose of civilization, of coming together and forming great societies that everyone benefits, is lost. And that's what's happening. You can see it in Britain with Brexit. It was just, okay, fine, the people voted to leave. No, we're going to obstruct it. So democracy has really completely capitulated. You have the same thing going on in Canada, United States. It doesn't matter what Trump does. The Democrats will try and turn it into something against him. Like this thing with with the Iranian general. Oh, well, he was also a political leader, so really that was an act of war, and so therefore we want to put in a resolution to this is nuts. It's not an act of war. So it's just anything they can possibly do. It's just obstruction. So there is no bipartisan movement anymore. It's always whatever they do is always opposed by the opposite side. And if you just look at the supposed impeachment, it was right down party lines. That's it. And Pelosi even told Democrats, you have to vote for this, period. You have no choice. That's anti-democratic. People are supposed to be representing the people in their local community, not being dictated to from Washington. And when you go back to Nixon, why did Nixon resign? Because it wasn't down party lines. It was much more, okay, fine, he did violate the law, this is it. Okay, that's it. So, he resigned. It wasn't a political, process where with Trump, it's like, it's really kind of a joke. If the FBI called Ukraine and said, we want you to investigate to see if, Biden did something, it's not an issue. Oh, but if Trump does it, that's impeachable. It just doesn't even make sense. And I put on our blog, Biden himself even came out and said that he did exactly what the Democrats are accusing Trump of. Saying that if you don't, fire this prosecutor investigating the company my son works for, I'm withholding $1 billion from you. So it's just politics. And it's just really showing, honestly, that we've come to the point that there is no civility anymore. It's just whatever the opposite side does, the other side has to oppose it. It's whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. Doesn't matter.
Is your economic confidence model close to a turning point, and what could it mean?
Yes, it turns actually on a Saturday, January the 18th. And most of the models seem to be, individual models on markets seem to be lining up with that. So it appears to be a fairly important turning point. We may see a top here in gold. And even there, I mean, most people don't realize, if you really look at gold, what made the last $120, $150 rally in gold going into 1980 was the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. So here too, you had gold rally up, not on economic things, but on geopolitical things with Iran. So, I mean, it's always, you know, and then with hindsight, they come back and say, oh, well, it's $1, things of this nature. That was never the issue back in 1980 either. So, you know, a lot of it is hype that people get involved in, because there are people that are pushing it. And quite honestly, just, you know, look at what they're saying and just follow the money. If they have an interest in that market and they're the ones selling it to you, maybe that's a conflict of interest that you should be paying attention to. So, but most of the markets are poised for, some are making highs, some are making lows, but this is a inflection point where we're going to see significant changes. The next cycle, business cycle, is basically beginning. So after like 2022, we should be experiencing a lot more inflation, things of this nature. And it's part of the geopolitical process where people are losing confidence in government. And as I've explained, no matter what country you go to, you have the left and the right, just absolutely and really an all-out war against each other. So, this basically leads to the collapse in confidence in government itself. And when that happens, that's when you start seeing real sustainable rallies in gold and things of this nature. So it's probably going to be more like after 2022, where people are just going to lose confidence in government, period. And just see, it's just one giant joke. Doesn't matter what you vote for. They're dictated, you know, as to what they're supposed to do from a central point. And that's it.
Is silver likely to move in sync with gold?
Eventually, yes. But I say the real key is it's going to have to be the collapse in confidence in government, and that's really what we're dealing with all these political machinations that are going on. I mean, you see it basically in Britain. I think is a good warning sign for what a lot of people should pay attention to. The left has gone really quite extreme, and the election in Britain showed that, you know, the Labour Party fell back dramatically to 1930 levels. I mean, people are kind of really fed up with that. I mean, the same thing that you had in Canada, and all of a sudden, you know, you're getting these separatist movements with Alberta, etc. I mean, it's, you know, you can't have a society where one group gets to oppress the other. It just does not work. That's not what civilization's about. And when you start getting into that, it's called tyranny and dictatorships. So, and, you know, that's what we're facing, and it's definitely causes separatist movements, and you'll see the same thing happening in the United States. You're seeing it happening in Germany, North versus South, in Italy, North versus South. France, you're seeing the same thing. Britain trying to get out of the EU. This is really a systemic problem on a global scale.
The government keeps telling us that the rate of inflation is around 2%, but what is the real rate of inflation, and is it likely to increase?
Yes. I mean, we will see the real inflation rate begin to rise quite sharply, but mostly out of 2022. I mean, it's definitely on a upward pace at this stage in the game. Just, you know, pay attention locally. I mean, things will go up, increases like 20%, things of this nature, yet inflation is supposed to be down. it's, the official numbers that they put out have been manipulated so many times. It's ridiculous. I mean, when housing was going up, they took it out, replaced it with rents. They keep manipulating things down because the CPI is generally where pensions are tied to and government spending. So if you manipulate the inflation statistics so that they don't move anymore, that helps government reduce the expenditures that they need to put in. So, I mean, we have such a monumental crisis in pensions, primarily in the government sector, because a lot of governments around the globe have never required their employees to even pay into anything. So all their benefits are just, extracted from taxpayers. You're seeing a major, upheaval in France and protests, all because of pensions. I mean, they have to reduce the pensions, otherwise everything goes broke. They promised all kinds of things, and it's just not plausible. It's just not the way it is. So, you're definitely in a situation where we're looking at a monumental pension crisis that is starting primarily in the public sector, but there are some private companies that are also finding their pension funds are underfunded. And then you have government that there is absolutely no coherent strategy. So they lower interest rates, but then they have laws saying many places, for example, have to have anywhere between 75 to 100% invested in government bonds to be secure. Well, then if you lower interest rates to negative, how are pension funds supposed to function? I mean, most of the pension funds are bankrupt. In Germany, they're talking about putting in a national tax just to try and bail out pension funds. CalPERS, which was the largest pension fund holder in the U.S. share market, still can't, make ends meet. In California, most of your states are in the same thing. And look at Illinois. I mean, New York. It's all this pension problem, and they've promised employees that they'll get this pension, and the employees never had to contribute even a dime. So we've got a major crisis coming, and that's part of the whole socialistic system that's collapsing. And then the average person out here, they just keep raising taxes. Rather than reform, it's like, okay, fine. Well, how much do we need to make the ends meet this month? Well, just raise the taxes again. And so you're lowering the standard of living on the average person. And this is really what's coming back to haunt government, and part of the reason government is really contracting and collapsing.
Could interest rates surprise to the upside anytime soon?
Yes. I mean, this is basically what the repo crisis is all about. I mean, most of these people that are out, they're saying, oh, this is quantitative easing or whatever. They don't know what they're even talking about. Quantitative easing was to stimulate the economy, and they were buying in long-term bonds to, in theory, create a shortage of long-term debt so that it would bring down the interest rates and help fund real estate crash. This is the exact opposite. The Fed has been having to step in and provide liquidity into the short-term repo market, which is on a 24-hour basis, mainly because the interest rates jumped to 10% on September 17th. Now, if the Fed does not step in and do this, then short-term rates rise. So it's been fighting the free market and trying to prevent the short-term rates from rising up. But meanwhile, the spread between private and public is widening. So it's short-term rates and long-term rates. You're going to see basically the trend is towards the upside. They're going to be rising dramatically, and the Fed is fighting a losing battle.
For people who may not know, what is the repo crisis, and why should we be so concerned about it?
The repo market is the wholesale market. So it is where they institutions borrow against their AAA usual, T-bills, things of this nature. They put these things into the repo market. They borrow cash to meet short-term needs. So that's really basically what goes on, but that's the wholesale market. So if that rises, then all the other rates are going to rise with that. So it's not a particular market that you can participate in yourself. Only major institutions do so and through primary dealers. But that is where everything starts. Once the repo market goes, that's basically where Lehman and Bear, et cetera, where that took place. It started in the repo, and then it manifests from there and just spreads like a contagion to everything else.
Are we likely to see collapsing real estate markets in 2020?
Not so much in 2020, but for there on out, yes. You have two major issues going on. You have some places which the politicians have, I don't know what, they think, they have to keep real estate prices down so that people can buy them and be affordable. Well, basically, again, what you're saying is we're going to make sure that the people that do have it are going to lose money. And we're going to raise taxes so they even have less equity in their homes. And then the big problem that you have is that as the interest rates rise and the confidence declines in the long term, you end up in a position where effectively you have banks will not be looking at lending into longer term mortgages. So everything shortens up. And the real estate market is really highly leveraged. It's dependent upon people being able to borrow 30 years or 20 years or whatever of future income and bring it into today. Without that, houses would have to sell for cash. And then the prices would then fall to whatever somebody can afford to pay.
We'll have more with Martin Armstrong when This Week in Money returns.
Cypress Development Corp is developing a world-class lithium resource in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. The size of the resource makes the Clayton Valley project a premier asset with the potential to impact the future of lithium supply. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the OTCQB, symbol CYDVF, and on Frankfurt, symbol C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Martin Armstrong. Martin, could President Trump be the catalyst to put an end to the manipulations of the world economy?
It's certainly possible. I wouldn't count, on it really very highly because look, the main reason they're after Trump so much is that, in all honesty, behind the curtain, they do not see him as one of them. So most of these other politicians are for sale. You go to them and you say, listen, I want this, that, or the other thing, and, well, what are you going to give me for, my campaign reelection? They can't buy Trump. That's why they hate him so much, and they scare him. They're really scared of him because that's the problem. If you can't buy him, then he can actually do something that you don't particularly like. And I don't think, he's not. A president doesn't have unlimited power. He can't do a lot, honestly, single-handedly. And he's really been besieged by the deep state all the way through. The military, they don't particularly care for him. It's kind of reminiscent of John F. Kennedy, actually, where Kennedy was against going into war and pulling troops back, and Trump was trying basically the same thing. And that's why, you had the intelligence communities and military against him. They want to use their toys. They want to basically do whatever they want to do. And they took Kennedy out, and after assassinating Kennedy, it was just a matter of a few weeks. Then Johnson signed and said, okay, fine, and started, Vietnam War. So I don't think that they would assassinate Trump right now, maybe around 2022, but, they've been trying their best to take him down one way or another because they just see him as an obstruction.
Could China be on course to repeat the boom and bust that Japan had in the late 80s, early 90s?
Eventually, but not, I don't think you'll see it in that sense. China is a little bit different in that a lot of people have been buying real estate, and yes, they're not occupied, etc., but they've been looking at that as coming out of communism. So to them, they see it as a tangible asset, which is safer than money in the bank. That's basically the attitude that you see over there. So, but look, China has been going through its boom and bust cycle. Right now, it's still going into its decline right now. But everything is subject to basically to the business cycle. Eventually, China, ironically, will move up and become the financial capital of the world because the West is basically blowing itself up. We have an all-out battle with this socialism, and all the promises and pensions and things of this nature that the government has promised people and not funded. They all sound nice, but what happens when you don't get it? They keep lowering things. I mean, most people don't even realize, but in December, in the United States, there was, before you had to sign up for Social Security at 70. They just raised it to 72. So they keep pushing things off. You pay taxes your entire life, and you'll never see it, anywhere close to half of what you actually put in real terms into something like that. And will ever come back? I mean, it's just the whole thing's a joke, really. So economically, it's just not working out very well. And instead of reforming, they just keep basically taking the screwdriver and trying to put it in further and further. It's a sad state of affairs, but I mean, look, I've been working with governments around the world for about 40 years, and I've come to the conclusion that, I mean, you can't walk in there and say, listen, if you don't do this, 20 million people will die tomorrow. And they'll go, well, maybe you're wrong. They get no benefit politically from preventative action. This is the way they look at it. If I said, vote for me because I saved your job, you're going to look at me and say, yeah, well, how do I know I would have lost it? All right. It's much better you lose your job. Then I run for president and say, okay, vote for me and I'll get the guy that did it. And everybody cheers. Yeah, go get him. This is the way politics works. So unfortunately, I've been in more high-level meetings than probably most of these people combined. You can't do anything. This is the way it really functions. That's it. They will never, ever do anything to prevent a crisis. I'll get a phone call like, can you please fix it? And you got 24 hours, stuff like that. But to avoid something, never. I mean, I had just met with Switzerland before. I told them, look, your peg is going to break. No, we think you're wrong, I said, look, the odds are in my favor. I'm sorry. Not one country has ever been able to beat this. Well, we think we're going to be able to. I left. Within 3 weeks, the peg broke. Oh, gee, can you come back? It's just the way it is. They will never, ever take action in advance. And I have dealt with governments from Asia to Europe to the Middle East. I have found the politicians are all the same. Doesn't matter what they are on. I even had the mandate from Hong Kong to try and buy land from Australia to move Hong Kong when it was going to be taken over, and they were worried. Met with the Australian government. They knew I knew the top people there. I met with Paul Keating, who was, the former, prime minister. And I said, look, I have a blank check here. I can pay off your national debt. What is the issue? What's the problem? And I said, are you racist? I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get anywhere. And he simply said, no. He says, we're not racist. He says, but they're fleeing basically, communism. So if they come here, they're going to vote for conservative. So it was a Labor government, and no matter what I said, no matter how much I paid, not interested, because they felt that if they let everybody from Hong Kong into Australia, they would vote for the Conservative Party and they would lose power. Simple as that.
And when you say governments are never proactive, it just reminds me of dangerous railway crossings where the neighbors know there's going to be an accident, but the government doesn't put a crossing arm and signal up until there's been a fatal accident. Absolutely.
Look, this is the way it is. It's a sad situation, but look, the way the United States was originally created, it was probably the perfect blueprint for a government. The problem was, these people would go to Congress, the terms were short, 2 years, and you only met for maybe 6 weeks. It was to look good on your resume. I donated 6 weeks. I'm a good person. I did that for the country. Then what happens? They start paying themselves. Once they start paying themselves, that was it. There was no term limits because they weren't paid. So nobody could do that for life for free. So they start paying themselves, and then there's no term limits, so now they just run there forever. And once you do that, they have lost all sense of what the people are. They are now bureaucrats. That's it. It's them against us. Simple as that. So they will never do anything in a preventative measure to help the people. It just does not exist. If they are short on money, they always raise taxes. Do they ever stand up and say, gee, can the people really afford it? No, they never do that.
Do you think the U.S. and China will complete a whole trade deal?
Look, the trade deal was basically suddenly became plausible only because of the repo crisis. That was it. China also came to realize that there's a real problem on the financial side, and the trade was basically a distraction to everybody. So that was just coming up. Trade is really very small. It's very minimal within the global economy, and it's not really that significant. The people, the press like to make the headlines out of it, and et cetera. I mean, Trump is not even fighting for something. I mean, unemployment is down to 1960 levels. We don't have enough people to actually even fund if you brought all the manufacturing back to the United States. There's not enough people here to work. So, what are you fighting for? You're fighting for statistics that no longer make sense. If we actually allocate trade according to the flag the company flies, the U.S. has a trade surplus and always has. It's just U.S. companies moving offshore, and it's mostly for taxes. I mean, I testified before Congress, before the House Ways and Means Committee on this. They wanted to know, how come no American companies got any of the contracts for the Yellow River Dam in China? I said, very simple. I said, you tax worldwide income. I said, German companies only tax on income earned in Germany. So already they're 40% less. And they just look at you like, oh, wow, really? Yes. But did they change anything? No. And now you have all these other countries saying, gee, we're broke. Maybe we should do the same thing with U.S. and tax worldwide income. So it's just a real mess. I mean, taxes are going to go up higher, and that will basically eventually probably lead to some sort of revolutions and separatist movements, etc. So, if Alberta splits, you'll see a change in tax policy there.
Have people who have separated in the past from other nations or their, home country, have they been more successful? And I guess the best example of success would be the United States getting out of Britain.
Yes, I mean, it's always that way. If the central government is not oppressive, there would be no separatist movement, period. It's when a government abuses its power. And as I said, civilization works when everybody benefits. When one party uses the other party to fund themselves, then the whole purpose of civilization ends. Oh, come on, join us so that I can tax you so I don't have to work. It's morally unethical. All right, but this is the way it happens. And historically, this is why you see basically countries coming together, or a bunch of separatists coming together and forming a great society, and then the government gets abusive, and then what happens? It breaks and it goes back to separatist again. It's like a pendulum. Throughout history, it goes back and forth all the time. So that's really what you've looked at. It's really what, took the Roman Empire up when everybody benefited, and then it also took it down when they started abusing people. So, it's just historically, it's common sense, really. You look at the environmentalists that are trying to oppress, Alberta, and, you have this girl, Greta, flying over to Canada. Oh, but she won't use airplanes, and she got her mother to quit her job because airplanes are so bad. But it's okay to fly to Canada the day before the election and then tell people to vote against their own self-interest? Come on. Who's paying for this? It's very clear. She stands up, she reads a script, and they're all being written by Greenpeace, by Jennifer Morgan. And this is what's happening. It's just a fundamentalist group of Greenpeace and Al Gore, basically, those two, have been pushing this agenda, and in order to get people to sign on, they use a 16-year-old girl to do it.
Yeah, and a lot of people aren't aware that Greenpeace is not a charity, but actually a company that in Germany and in Canada does not have charitable status.
No, they don't. And they've been long regarded as terrorists. They actually are quite violent, and that wasn't getting them anywhere. So now they're trying to use Greta. There's a film coming out on Davos, and I was invited to the grand opening of it. I helped advise on some of the things for it. It was the 50th anniversary of Davos, and in this film you'll see Greta basically there, and you'll see Jennifer Morgan is basically taking her, and she stands up reading her scripts, and then when Jennifer Morgan realized that she was being filmed in orchestrating a lot of this with Greta, then she asked the director to take her out of it, and he said, "No, you're part of it." So it's just a joke. It really is a joke. But they mix things. We're all against pollution, things of that nature are fine. I lived in London when all the buses were using diesel. You had to hold your breath when you walk past them. Yes, those things are horrible, etc. But that doesn't change the climate. All right, the Earth has been going through cycles of warming periods and cold periods for a long time, and we've had ice ages back and forth. And we're heading back towards even NASA says the next solar cycle, which begins here in 2020, is supposed to be the solar minimum, the lowest that they've seen in hundreds of years. That's why it is getting colder. I came down here to Cancun trying to find global warming. It's actually only in the 70s here.
Martin, U.S. stock markets continue to hit new highs. We've seen predictions of the Dow hitting 50, 75, even 100,000 points. What do you see ahead for the U.S. markets?
It's going to pull back a bit, but the U.S. stock market is going up basically because you're looking at a shift in capital from public sector to private sector. I mean, the stock market will back off, find support, but we're looking at probably the Dow going up substantially in the years ahead. But, immediately right now, it's we can be seeing, some topping out developments and then pull back to retest support and then move up again.
Are you bullish on crude?
Well, I think all of your commodities more after 2022 are going to be in a rising period. We still have a rough patch that we're going to see going into 2022. And that's mainly because of the economies outside the United States are in real disarray, particularly in Europe. You also see in Japan, I know a lot of people don't necessarily pay attention outside of North America, but yes, we've had the repo crisis. Japan has stood up. The Bank of Japan has said, we will buy all government bonds unlimited, trying to prevent interest rates from rising. The whole global economy is coming apart. And that is largely going to send capital flows from Asia and from Europe still into the dollar. So you have a risk on the commodity side of the dollar going up dramatically yet over the next couple of years, and then it will flip the other way, and people will then just lose confidence in all governments.
Where is capital currently flowing?
It's been primarily into the dollar. What people have to understand is that the structure of the euro really has become a complete joke. All they did was the failure to consolidate the debts, which was orchestrated by Kohl from Germany. It was the price for Germany to get in. And his view is, gee, if we consolidate the debts, then we're going to be underwriting Greece and Spain, etc. So all they did was, yes, they created a single currency, but they transferred the risk from currencies to the bond markets. That's all they did. So the promises, one currency will be paying the same interest rate, that was all just absolute nonsense. So Europe is in real disarray. I talked to a lot of central banks. They're fed up with Europe. It's why the euro is not really even a reserve currency. Other central banks don't want to hold it. It's a negative interest rate, so they're going to be taxed to support Europe. It's a joke. The whole thing's a joke. So an institution, you can't invest in the euro like you do in the United States. You just call up, okay, fine, buy me treasuries, that's it. Okay? All 50 states pay different interest rates based upon their credit rating. In Europe, there is no central bond market. So if an institution's going to invest in Europe, they still have to pick which state to invest in. So they can pick Germany versus Italy, etc. So this is what goes on. And you have a real clash between these different areas. And so the volatility that used to be in foreign exchange is merely transferred to the bond markets. So this is why Europe is not doing very well, and it's not possible for it to actually do well. the structural design is an absolute abomination.
We had Dr. Mark Faber on the show a few weeks ago. He says he sees a severe and lengthy recession ahead for Canada. Do you agree?
No, not necessarily. Yes, look, the economic growth, real growth rates are not fantastic. All right, and I wouldn't expect them to come back. So it depends upon what your definition of a recession really is. Canada would be doing worse if it wasn't for the capital flows coming out of Europe and Asia. So Canada is benefiting to some degree from this turmoil outside of North America. So any suppression per se will be far less for Canada than it would be for a lot of other regions. And eventually the commodities will begin to rise, so you'll see more of a incentive for the West to really split from the East. And you have to understand that, for example, when the Federal Reserve was created, why did it have all these different branches around the country? Because each branch was independent. So from the 1906 earthquake in San Francisco, that created a capital flow internally. So the insurance companies are on the East Coast and all the claims are on the West. So the money started flowing that way. So that led to banks failing eventually in New York City in the panic in 1907. So they realized that it was a capital flow problem. So they created the Federal Reserve in 1913 with all these branches, and they were independent. Then World War II comes. FDR, he usurps all of the independence of the Fed, puts it in Washington, and basically imposes one interest rate to fit all to fund the war. And this is the problem with government. Once they do something like that, they never put it back. So Canada has the same problem. So they were like raising interest rates when there was a real estate boom in Toronto. Meanwhile, they're putting farmers and commodity oriented businesses in the West into bankruptcy. One size does not fit all. We learned that before. We have forgotten that lesson. So this also contributes to the separatist movements. So you get this one policy coming out of the East against the West, and the West says, hey, this isn't fair. And they're correct. They're absolutely correct. And we should have regional, basically separatist movements economically, but, that was all usurped to fund World War II, and nobody put it back.
If you were Prime Minister of Canada, what would you do to make Canada economically strong and prosperous?
Well, I would restore basically independent interest rates, let the capital flows internally develop that way, knock off this nonsense of the imposing rules for, there's climate change, which is a joke, really. As if putting a tax on $1,000 to every household in Canada is going to really change the climate. It only puts more money in the politicians' pockets. So we start looking at the average person. I mean, how are you going to deal with what's coming down in the future? All these pensions and things of this nature you promised government employees that you cannot fund. So, I mean, look, you really have to look at a complete overhaul and restructuring of governments going forward, and I seriously doubt that that's going to take place.
Are cryptocurrencies here to stay?
No. The governments have been allowing them to take place as an experiment to get people basically accustomed to them. But bottom line is they will basically more or less outlaw them, and the policies that they want to do is impose their own cryptocurrency, one per nation. And the main reason they want to do that is they see this as one the means to eliminate paper money, so that they get every penny of tax that they think they're due. And secondly, if you move towards that sort of a national cryptocurrency, their view is, and I've been in meetings where they clearly point this out, they would eliminate bank runs. So it wouldn't be a way for you to run down to a bank and say, well, okay, give me all my money. Well, we're going to say, here's my USB stick, please put it on here. So they see it as, being justified, oh, this will eliminate crime, this will, they see it as so many different benefits, and they're just waiting for the crisis to hit to basically give them the authority to do so. It's like 9/11. Once that took place, and they knew it was coming. That's why Homeland Security was created, because they said, all these different agencies, they all had information, but they weren't sharing it. So basically the government always benefits from a crisis. They get more power. So the next crisis that they're going to see financially coming out of this will then look at eliminating the currencies and outlawing independent cryptocurrencies and have it all transferred into government. In Germany, they've already authorized the banks to be the custodian for cryptocurrencies. That's the next step. So what comes after that, it's, when they confiscated gold, okay, they didn't go house to house knocking on your door, give me all your gold. Once it's in the banking system and it's the reserves of the bank, then that's it. With a stroke of a pen, you got to turn over all the gold. So all the banks have to do so. So once the banks are the custodian for cryptocurrency, okay, fine, freeze all that money and you now transfer it to this cryptocurrency, which will be administered by the central bank. That's the objective. And that's where they're going to go.
Do you think people would find a way around that, start exchanging gold or some kind of other made up or homemade currency?
Look, in the Great Depression, there were different cities did issue their own currencies, mainly because there was a shortage of currency at the time. Gold, they've been really clamping down on a lot. They've put in new regulations in Europe, insisting basically, anybody just trying to transfer $1,000 now has to be reported. But there's always a black market. So there'll be black markets developing. We'll probably see a lot of society going back to some form of like barter or whatever. If you look at the prisons, what did they use for money? Cigarettes or packets of mackerel. So you can use anything you want, as long as you have confidence that somebody else is going to take it from you. So even people that didn't smoke traded in cigarettes. Didn't matter, as long as somebody else would accept it in payment for something else.
Has the bull market for cannabis stocks come and gone?
No, not yet. Let's say we're just in this transitional period where eventually the people are going to realize that our problem on this particular cycle is not the corporations, it's really governments. So all of the governments on a global scale are in the same problem. You're looking at it more like a contagion coming from the local and state level, provincial governments up to the federal, because the lower governments underneath federal, they can't print money. So only the federal government can. So you're having a situation where a lot of them are just simply moving towards bankruptcy. And then that will put in pressure to raise taxes and more bailouts and things between governments. But this is really what we're into at this stage in the game, and going over the next decade, That's the real primary problem that we have. It's the collapse is coming, and it's war on the government sector.
We'll have more with Martin Armstrong right after the break.
Engineer Gold Mines is focused on the exploration and development of the historic high-grade Engineer Gold Mine situated 32 kilometers southwest of Atlin, British Columbia. Engineer Gold Mines is fully permitted for surface and underground exploration with the 2019 drill program now underway. Engineer Gold Mines Limited trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol EAU. For more information, please visit us at engineergoldmines.com.
This Week in Money is archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Martin Armstrong. Automakers are announcing plans to build more and more electric vehicles. Could this lead to shortages in the commodities used to make lithium-ion electric vehicle batteries?
Well, to some degree, but I mean, again, these things are not really well thought out. We don't have enough power plants to produce enough electricity to replace all the cars. I mean, my neighbor bought a Tesla in Florida, and I kind of joke with him. I said, if a hurricane was coming, you got to get out of town. You can only go about 200 miles. So it's not real plausible. And you go to a city and people living in high towers. I mean, there's not enough recharging stations. I mean, and then you have to generate all this electricity. So, I mean, in Germany, yeah, they're pushing this, and a lot of the guys in the auto industry fear that they're moving towards bankruptcy. But, Germany still produces most of its electricity from coal.
Have we seen peak sports, and what could it mean for society?
Yeah, I mean, look, that is typically part of the cycle. As you come in towards the end of the business cycle, the luxury things start declining, and that also is reflected in sports. I mean, particularly like in baseball, and these people all kneeling down in protest. First, you're going to a sport game to get your mind off of everything. You're not there so they can turn this into a protest for themselves. The same thing happened, in New York on the play of Hamilton. The vice president was there, and then the play, all the actors stopped, and they proceeded to basically, argue against them. I mean, this is, people are paying money for a show. This isn't your opportunity to voice your particular opinion. I mean, this is, you go do that someplace else. I'm not paying you to do that. And this is what's happening in sports. You can't mix those sorts of things. It's just simply the way it is.
Is the push for globalism part of a cycle?
Not really. We've always had globalism. I mean, even from ancient Roman times. But it's more that we're beginning to pay attention to it, that events in Europe can affect things over here. But you have to understand, when you look at politicians, they stand up and they say, vote for me and I'll lower interest rates or unemployment or whatever, as if they can control your domestic economy and anything that happens outside is irrelevant. That's why they fail. Okay, so we are all impacted by everybody else. The U.S. would not have been going up, particularly, over the last 4 years, if it hadn't been problems in Europe, in Brexit, etc. It sends capital moving over in this direction. So if those things didn't happen, then those capital flows wouldn't happen. So everything is connected. We can't stand alone, and politicians are still arguing over vote for me and I'll do this or whatever. It's very nice, but it's impossible. Every country is dependent upon everybody else. That's simply the way it is.
Are we entering into an anti-corruption cycle?
Yes. People are getting fed up with government everywhere. You see hundreds of thousands of people protesting against corruption everywhere from Thailand to, Romania. This is the way it is. I mean, just look at what goes on. I mean, it doesn't matter what political party you're in. They're all basically out there just for whatever they can get. I mean, you have, like Joe Biden, his son is suddenly advising some energy company in Ukraine with no expertise whatsoever in energy. You had Hillary's brother suddenly being given the gold mines in Haiti. I mean, you had, basically, it doesn't matter what political party they're on. I mean, politicians exempt themselves from all the laws, period. In the private sector, you can't do that. You can't say, well, you didn't pay me, but you paid my son. That's still corruption. But to them, it's like, oh, well, I didn't get it directly. They paid my brother, my son, my this, whatever. They're always exempt. Anybody else in the private world, we'd all go to jail for that.
Is there such a thing as a hoax cycle that could apply to the climate crisis and where it's headed?
I think that basically this will really kind of be exposed. I mean, their whole nonsense really goes back to, the data they're using, they change their start and ending to support something. But this is the same groups that started with the environmental things, wetlands back in the 90s, and pushed that legislation through. And it's all about reducing population. That's really what it's about. I was at a White House dinner, and they had stuck me at a table with all the heads of the various different environmental groups, and got them comfortable, and they started actually saying that the real objective was reducing population. And my friend, Dick Fox, who was the chairman of Temple University at the time, he then bluntly said to him, he says, so whose grandchild are we trying to prevent from being born? Is it yours or is it mine? And this is their agenda. And they just change whatever they have to do. If you look at that supposed report that came out, which turned out to be a real joke, they said, 1,000 scientists have signed this thing saying it's an absolute climate crisis. And what were the recommendations? All the way down at the bottom, the girls should not have children anymore. And what climate scientist is going to basically, what's his authority to come out with that recommendation? And in there, apparently somebody working in the group didn't particularly feel that this was just a fraud. So in the list, and you can Google it, in the list was Mickey Mouse, Professor Mickey Mouse of the Mickey Mouse, basically, Institute for the Blind in Namibia. They were making a fake name, sticking it in here, and then the press goes, 1,000 scientists have said we only got 5 years to live. Well, if you Google it, you'll find out we were all supposed to be dead in 2000. Then we were all supposed to be drowning by 2020. I think we're still doing okay. They keep coming out with these wild and thinks, we only got 5 years to live. Well, then let's eliminate all taxes and have a party.
Does everything have a cycle?
Yes, there is nothing that is exempt from cycles. Look at fashions. I mean, sports. They say, when the NFL wins, what stock market does depends upon which team wins. With women's skirts, they go, when the good times, the skirts go up, and the depressions, the skirts go down. It's always, it doesn't matter what it is, men's ties widen and they shrink back. We always, are looking for something different. And that's, we call it spring fever, whatever, but, there's a cycle to absolutely everything. People's moods change, etc. So it's just the way things are.
How important is it for people to think for themselves?
Well, very important, but if you really look at the statistics, take the President of the United States. They stand up and they say, I got the mandate. If you look at them, what did they win by? 53%, 54%. That's it. There's only 3 presidents that ever had 60% plus. And that was FDR the first time he ran, Johnson after Kennedy was assassinated, and Richard Nixon. That was it. So if you really look at it, 45% of the people are always going to vote left, 45% are always going to vote right. The people who really decide the leadership is only about 10%. They don't, unfortunately, that's the extent of the people that actually do think for themselves.
What's the latest on Julian Assange?
Pretty much the same thing as Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, they're not about to give him a trial. They've been keeping him in solitary confinement. Been reports that his health has been down dramatically, and they refuse to allow independent doctors to come in and even see him. I mean, you take Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, you have to really look at this. He was not a pedophile. Pedophile is pre-puberty. He was using girls that are basically 16, 17, 1 year under the 18 limit, okay? Most people wouldn't be able to distinguish a girl who was 17 versus 18 by looking at them, all right? So what he was really doing was getting people involved in this, princes, etc. So he had blackmail power over them. But if he used pre-puberty, like 7-year-olds or something like that, they wouldn't be interested. Okay, so he had to bring it, maybe they didn't even know that a girl was 17 versus 18. Who knew? But you won't know that fact. But I believe what he was doing was basically bringing so many named people, getting them involved. So he had blackmail power over them. And that's really what I think, why there is no way that, he was ever going to get a fair trial. Because how many people are going to be, drugged into a trial like that? It's too controversial. He was probably charged by some zealous prosecutor who didn't realize what he was stepping into, and then when he did, that was it. So I think that's largely what you're looking at, and I doubt seriously that Assange, really, I mean, it's just a joke. I mean, what is it? It's illegal to tell the people that the government is acting illegally. I mean, that's basically what's been going on. They routinely torture people and things of this nature. I mean, it's standard operational procedure. So I seriously doubt that he will ever see a fair trial, and he may end up like Jeffrey Epstein, just dead, and they'll call it natural causes, heart attack, whatever.
There's a lot of talk about 5G and how it's the key to the Internet of Things, but there's also a lot of concern regarding 5G and the health of animals, humans, plants. What are your thoughts on 5G?
I haven't really looked at it to basically give you any kind of a real definitive response to that. I don't like to comment on something that I haven't really looked at the details closely. Otherwise, it's just an opinion. That's it should be at least, if you're going to have an opinion on something, at least tie it into some sort of research is actually definitive.
Do you think President Trump will be reelected?
Yes. I think he will be reelected. The Democrats really don't have anybody that could possibly stand up to him. I mean, even going into the first the first election in this primary process, I mean, Joe Biden is neck and neck with Bernie Sanders. I mean, it's just, and even, Biden's like less than 30%. So they don't really have anybody. There's been talk about Hillary's going to try and step in. Democrats might get desperate enough to try to do that, but they don't have anybody at this stage in the game. Trump was elected not because he was some sort of great person or whatever. but he was elected mainly because he wasn't one of them. And a lot of people, say, oh, well, his comments are kind of crazy, this, that, whatever. The opposite side of that is at least you know what he really does think. On the other side, these people will go, oh, yes, I feel your pain, and meanwhile, and silently in their mind, they're calling you some sort of a real jerk, So I don't know. I mean, at least you know where he does stand that way. But computer's basically showing it maybe a tighter race than it is right now. But he'll probably be reelected.
Are Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage good for the future of Britain?
Yes, Britain's definitely got to get out of the EU. I mean, it's really unbelievable, but I go to meetings in Europe, and our CEO over there in Europe is Ashley, and he's British. I can go into these meetings, and I'm told I can't bring him. I said, why? He's British. Sorry. So I'm acceptable because I'm American. So they don't see me as having any skin in the game. But it's just the way it is. I mean, they have always been prejudiced against Britain. They view that Britain basically helped save Europe. So they've always felt like are subservient to Britain, and you look at the courts, every time they sue Britain in the European court, Britain loses. It can't ever win. So it's pointless being in there.
2020 is the year of the rat. What are we likely to see in rat years?
Well, I don't know. The Chinese calendar, they say it's the year of change. I do think we are in for a change geopolitically, economically, and we're looking at a lot of things beginning to shift here in 2020.
People are being divided by race, politics, class, religion, and a lot more. And of course, much of that is due to propaganda. How can people become united again instead of divided? Or is it possible?
I don't think it is possible. I think this cycle just has to play itself out. And at that point, you really have to get to the stage where, look, China and Russia collapsed because of Marxism. It's just our turn. That's it. You can't have this type of system that acts as a parasite and lives off of one group for the benefit of another. It just doesn't work that way by law. I mean, people are normally charitable, etc. I mean, charities were there. I mean, it's pre-taxes, etc. I mean, if you look at a lot of the major different things that very famous people donated, etc., they donated them long before there was income taxes. They do it maybe for legacy or whatever. They also realize they can't take it with them. So you go to most museums and you'll see, art collections are donated by people that assembled them. It wasn't paid for by taxpayer money. So, I mean, it's just the way things are. But I don't think you're going to be able to stop the cycle, really. We have to play this out. And only when that basically drops will we begin to see some change.
Is hoarding cash a good idea?
For now, yes. You definitely want to make sure that what's going on. Cash is something that you basically should have some, I think, at least stashed away, because you never know what's going to happen on the banking side.
We'll have more with Martin Armstrong right after the break.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com. This Week in Money is archived online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Martin Armstrong. Is it true that nearly 40% of billionaires do not have college degrees?
Yes. I mean, that's and rising, actually. Schools don't, they can't teach entrepreneurship. They can't teach creativity. And if you look at even the ones that were inside, like Einstein, they call them basically a joke. He'd never amount to anything. Anytime you're going against the established principles at a particular thing, then you're the one that is chastised and chased out of the system. So all changes come from outside, never from inside. I mean, even Keynes, he wrote a book in 1925, and they called him a joke. So when the crash comes, then, oh yeah, remember Keynes? Yeah, that was a good idea. It's the way things happen. So never expect anything. I mean, there's a book that I've put on our site sometimes. You know, why A students work for C students and B students work for government. So I think the D students work for government. But that's just the way it is. The ones that challenge the professors, etc., are the ones that have creativity. They're the ones that actually create industries. You can go down the list from Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and I mean, even the founder of, which I really found quite amusing, was that they asked Zuckerberg to come back and address the graduating class at Harvard. And what are you going to say? Well, you know, you fools graduated, and very nice. I dropped out, and I'm a billionaire.
Vaccines are a hot button topic. Did you get the flu shot?
No, I didn't. I've just been too busy. I mean, sometimes I have gotten it, sometimes I haven't. It's I don't know about the flu shot so much. I did do a piece on that. I was really surprised at so many emails that came in. I mean, yes, I had gotten myself. My mother had me vaccinated. I had my children vaccinated. But you were talking about like major vaccines for polio, things of this nature. It was like less than 10. I mean, now they want to give 70. I mean, there are definitely a lot of problems with that, because you can take and test one particular vaccine and it'll be perfectly fine. You can take another one and it's perfectly fine. But what happens when you just go get medicines from the doctor? I mean, they say, okay, well, don't take this with this or this or this. When you combine certain things, you end up with an unknown quantity. And there are a lot of kids that have died. Some have gotten autism. I mean, it's not necessarily a individual vaccine, but it certainly can be a combination that is lethal to certain people with certain genetic profiles. But the solution for them was to go to Congress and to be exempt from being sued. That's not right. If they can never be sued or anything like that, then they're also not going to test. So it is a very big controversial issue, and I certainly wouldn't have my children today vaccinated with 70 different things. I mean, you want me to do that, then remove the protection that they have, that they're exonerated from all blame. I mean, that's ridiculous.
Which markets are you currently watching closely?
Basically all of them. I mean, the currencies, the stock markets, and gold going into the turning point on January 18th. Most of them are showing like directional changes and panic cycles 1 week before, 1 week after that. So it looks like to be an interesting period.
Do you have any investing wisdom you could leave us with?
Well, everything's going to change, I think. This is the year of change. So I think we're going to have to look at this much closer after January and stay on tune. But I mean, look, there's no thing that anybody could say, like, put your money here and be safe for the next 10, 20 years. We're not in that kind of a cycle. We're in things that basically you're getting 2 years back and forth. So it's something that you're going to have to more or less be on top of and pay attention, because we're not in a long-term trend. This is a very highly volatile period that we're in between now and about 2032, actually. So you got about 12 years left, and that's going to be a period of really violent oscillating trends back and forth.
How can people find out more about Armstrong Economics and your brand new book, which, as you said, keeps selling out?
So you can go to our website, armstrongeconomics.com. It's totally free. We don't require people to even register to get in. We're kind of like old-fashioned that way, believe in everybody's privacy. As far as the book is concerned, it will be on Amazon probably sometime in February. I mean, you can go on and bookmark the page. It says, unavailable right now, but we're working to get the third edition of it out. Kind of feel that it's been selling out everywhere around. I mean, the first edition somebody had on apparently on eBay was going for like $3,900 or something. And I understand the London FT wrote an article about that. So it's been a very interesting process for a book, I think, because largely it is dealing with something that everybody knows there's a real problem with it. So we're going to have to deal with the theories behind everything very soon.
Martin, thank you so much for being on This Week in Money.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
My guest has been Martin Armstrong, founder of Armstrong Economics. His new book, Manipulating the World Economy, The Rise of Modern Monetary Theory, and the Inevitable Fall of Classic Economics, Is There an Alternative? And that wraps up our show. We'd like to thank our guests, Ross Clark and Martin Armstrong, and thank you for listening. If you have any questions for our guests or the show, you can send them to info@howstreet.com. Now stand by for company showcase updates from American Manganese President Larry Reaugh and Cypress Development Consultant Don Mosher. I'm Jim Goddard. We'll be back next week with more This Week in Money.
Comments made on This Week in Money are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at talkdigitalnetwork.com. This Week in Money is a production of Howe Street Media Incorporated. Executive producer is Tom Allen. Welcome to Company Showcase, an advertising feature on HoweStreet.com.
I'm Jim Goddard. I'm speaking with Larry Reaugh, CEO and President of American Manganese. Welcome back to the show, Larry.
Great to be on here, Jim.
Larry, you just put out a news release this morning. What was in it?
Well, it was kind of a news release talking about our immediate goals, and we didn't go into the long-term goals. That'll come from another time. But and we also announced that we had a pretty decent warrant exercise on where we received $731,000, and so that puts the company in good shape to move ahead with these immediate goals. And so I'm happy about the way that ended up. Now, this week in the market has been a bit of a I guess you'd call it a roller coaster. We got hit pretty hard yesterday on selling, mostly from one house, and I've been talking about predator trading forever, and now with the Save BC mining group that's out there, it's starting to get some more attention. And I just want to point out that I have an interview with the guy that's heading that up on the attachments, and you should listen to that because it's a concern to any shareholder that we don't have a level playing field here in Canada. So we should go there. But now on to other topics that makes everything better. We're planning to meet with Battery Safety Solutions in the next few weeks to maybe a couple of months. We may go over there, or they may come over here. And I also mentioned that we'd applied for initial grant from the Canadian government, and we're hoping that that'll come through here shortly. So that'll get us on track for getting larger and more grants. So that's looking good. And we met with Cometco on Monday. We had the
the meeting over getting them to prepare a preliminary economic assessment and design proposal for a 3-ton per day plant. We expect that we will get the proposal from them in the next couple of weeks, and the cost estimate, and that's really important. I know people are, impatient, as we all are, to see things happen more rapidly. But you got to remember that this is a new technology, and even though we've proven it up in a pilot plant, and we've done some Tier 1 testing, and we're working with the Department of Energy labs in the United States, that there's still things that people want to see, and they'd like to see a independent PIA, which is a preliminary economic evaluation or assessment, I should say, and so that is usually been a turning point in any project that I've done. Turning point in interest, a turning point in value. Once you get that out there, people have some targets that they can start to aim at. So our press release was good. It was well received. We gained back some ground. The last time I looked on the trading this morning with fairly decent volume, and so I think that we're heading in the right direction. Now, there's lots of things that happened. One of the things that I attached was a report by a recycler in the U.S. when they talked about the value of cathodes, and I'm not sure everybody picked up on that. When we've worked on our business plan, which is a pro forma business plan, by the way, we use numbers that come from the commodity itself, like cobalt is priced at a certain price, nickel's priced at a certain price reported on the LME, lithium has other reports on their prices, etc., etc. But we've known that there's a better value for cathode materials that have been chemically treated to go into batteries. And that recycler, and I'm not sure everybody picked up on it, said that doubles the price of the metal. So if that is in fact, even if it was up 20%, that's a significant increase in the value of the metal that's in a battery. And at this time, we do cathode to cathode, which means if we take some material from a battery manufacturer and we treat it in our plant and recycle that cathode material, that we return it to them probably in a better purity and than the original cathode, and but it's cathode to cathode, so we think that we can enjoy some spreads there on the value. But that's something that we have to look into. You don't read a lot about that. I jump on anything that will talk about it. I'm sure that a recycler in the world would know the value of the battery grade cathode material, as well as the value of the cathode itself on the individual commodities that are in it. So I just wanted to point that out because I'm not sure that was really that noticeable in the attachment that we had, but it was there, and that was from our last week's podcast, Jim. We're looking forward to a great year. We've been approached, and we'll be entering into NDAs with other big EV or car companies around the world. We've been, contacts keep coming in. And while we're at it, I'd just like to say that one of the most aggressive groups out there are out of India. They are really pushing for EV cars, EV battery manufacturing and EV recycling. So I'd say that out of every 3 or 4 queries we get for due diligence calls are coming out of India now. And, so that's, we'd like to be on the leading edge, with anything that's being done in India. And, but they're getting really aggressive about it. Their population is, similar to, China. And, any, projections show that the Indian market is going to grow. So, that said and done, we got snow here today, and so it was a little lengthy getting into work. But, it's going to happen sooner or later. Next week could even be colder. And but I wish everybody a great weekend.
Larry, for people new to American Manganese, what's the company all about?
American Manganese is a critical metals company that has properties in the critical metal field, but our major push is on the recycling of lithium-ion batteries. There's a resource we don't have to drill, and that's a resource that is readily available, and that's what we're focusing the company's commercialization on. So we are traded on the Venture Exchange, the Toronto Venture Exchange, under the symbol AMY. We're traded in the U.S. under the symbol AMYZF. We're traded in Frankfurt under the symbol 2AM. We have a great website out there called AmericanManganeseInc.com, where people can go to do the due diligence on the company. And you can contact the company at phone number 778-574-4444. You can get a hold of me at my email address, LREAUGH@AMYMN.com.
Larry, thank you so much for the update.
Thanks, Jim.
And good luck bashing through the snow in Vancouver.
Well, it's a rare event that usually lasts a couple of weeks.
My guest has been Larry Reaugh, CEO and President of American Manganese. I'm Jim Goddard. Our conversation took place on January 10th.
Comments made on Company Showcase are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at HowStreet.com. Company Showcase is a production of How Street Media Incorporated. Welcome to Company Showcase, an advertising feature on HowStreet.com.
I'm Jim Goddard. I'm speaking with Don Mosher. He's the corporate consultant for Cypress Development. Welcome back to the show, Don, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Thanks for having me back.
Don, I hear that Cypress has had some good news from the courts. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah, we had a company down in Nevada that encroached on some of our claims and actually drilled a couple of holes. And they disputed our ownership. It ended up going to court down in Nevada. The ruling confirmed the status of our claims. And now what we're waiting for is the judge to rule on what the actual damages are and what Cypress is going to get awarded out of this trial. For sure we get back all court costs, and we'll see what comes in additional to that.
That sounds like a plot out of so many movies. Somebody, mining into your area. How is that possible with GPS today? To accidentally go into somebody's land. Obviously, it wasn't an accident.
Yeah, I don't know if I can even speak to it other than to say these guys went on the property, drilled the holes, overstaked our claims, and then took us to court disputing our ownership of it. They really had no basis for anything that they did. They really do view anything like that very seriously in the U.S. And, everything worked out in our favor. We had staked the claims properly. We did have ownership of the claims. It was really shocking that they actually came on the property and drilled a couple of holes. And, we'll see what the damages are, and we'll see if they can claim the damages that are awarded to us at the end of the day. But, as far as us looking to do deals on the property or somebody buying the project or anything along that line coming down in the future, once the PFS is done, it really validates the fact that we own this project and nobody has any concerns about anything along that line. So if you actually did get into some sort of a deal, whether it's a joint venture or whether somebody actually wants to buy the project, whatever form that takes, everybody can be very comfortable that we are the owners of the entire land package.
Don, is Cypress's development in Nevada unique in the lithium world?
It's very unique. Most of the world's lithium production either comes out of the Atacama Desert in the form of brines. In Clayton Valley, where we're located, the original brine mine is located. Albemarle owns the Silver Peaks mine there. It's been in production for well over 50 years. The grades are dropping on it. It doesn't produce what would be considered a large amount of lithium. I think it's like 3,500 tons a year. And that represents the only production in the United States of America right now. The largest producers of lithium from brines are located in the Atacama Desert in Chile, Argentina, and Bolivia, although Bolivia I don't believe has any production at all right now, and they have some serious problems with contaminants in the brines. But in Chile, the locals and indigenous populations surrounding those brine facilities have gotten rather angry. There's been a lot of accusations that SQM and Albemarle have been drawing more than their quota out of the aquifers there, and they were planning on expanding those facilities dramatically. And an environmental court in Chile has come forth and ruled in favor of the indigenous and local populations that they have first right to the aquifers there, and there won't be any expansion in the foreseeable future that I'm aware of as a result of those decisions coming in. So ultimately, when you take a look at the projections put forward by Morgan Stanley, for example, saying there was going to be a flood of lithium hitting the market, it just demonstrates that you can't base anything on the projections when you just take a look at what companies say they're going to expand to. I mean, what you actually need to do is what Eric Zoncharb did at Canaccord, go back to 2011, take a look at what was projected and what actually came on, and what only about 10-20% of what projected came on stream. So these projections that have been put forth over the last couple of years, when you run into these disputes with local and indigenous populations in these areas, you need to take that into account. And those projections, I think, are going to be way offside. So last year we actually saw an 18% increase in the demand for lithium and a 12% drop in price. And I think a lot of that price drop was, number one, it's not a global market, and number two, it was based on these projections put forth by a big bank. I think you're going to see that turn around. I think you'll see an increase in the lithium prices. I think they'll have to relook at their projections out there, and they're going to be depending more on spodumines, which are more costly. So our project is a claystone. There is no commercial claystone production anywhere in the world right now, but Western Lithium in Thacker Pass is working on a claystone deposit, as we are. And there's one other project that's more of a boron project in Rhyolite Ridge, which is like 35 miles from us. Really, the two foremost claystone projects in the world, I would say, is Cypress development and Western Lithium, moving forward into pre-feasibility studies being released and published. And I expect ours to come out maybe the end of January, early February. We've had a couple of delays at the engineering lab. And that was in regards to one of the engineers that's running the study for us having some health problems.
Don, for people new to Cypress development, what are you all about?
We're all about developing claystone deposit in Clayton Valley, Nevada, and offering the world a third reliable supply of lithium. I think that the demands are understated. If you take a look, for example, Rio Tinto put out a report the other day where they project that the world is going to use more copper in the next 25 years than it's used in the history of using copper. Now, that copper is obviously going to electrification, and you need to store the electricity to use it. So all these electric vehicles, here in Vancouver, Harbour Air flew an electric plane the other day, which may work well for short hauls. So there is a lot of potential demand out there for lithium.
Don, where are you traded and under what symbols?
So our symbol on the Toronto Venture Exchange is CYP. We also trade in the United States, and our symbol down there is CYP.V. And then over in Frankfurt, we also have some trading. It's C1Z1 in Frankfurt.
If people have questions for Cypress, how can they get a hold of you?
They can go to the website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com. There's the contact tab in there to get hold of us, and all the relevant information regarding the company is all encompassed on the website.
Don, thank you so much for the update.
My pleasure, Jim.
I've been speaking with Don Mosher, corporate consultant for Cypress Development. I'm Jim Goddard. Our conversation took place on January 8th.
Comments made on Company Showcase are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at howstreet.com. Company Showcase is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.